I think many of you have been with me and us as we've gone through our Lenten Wednesday worship. So if you have, then you'll catch on some of these themes. One of the biggest ones is God's rights. Who God is and who we are, and how we get those places mixed up, which is pretty much the essence of Lent, to put those things back in their proper order. And Passover is one of those situations where God exercised his full right. It was the culmination of all these things that he was doing to assert his power. And when we read in the Bible how Pharaoh's heart was hardened to lead up to this point where there would be this creeping death that went through, where the firstborn male of every household would die unless it is that they had the blood on the mantle of the threshold. The name of the animal that gave its life for that blood was a lamb. And not just any lamb, the lamb that would do that we call the Paschal lamb. This is the lamb whose blood saves you. And God exercised his right as God to kill, to end the life of whomever he wanted, and he decided that he would choose the firstborn male of every household, a very important person, certainly at that time. And what's interesting is he decided that the reason he would do or not do would be those who listened. Those who followed what God said to do, to take a lamb to sacrifice, is to put this blood on your door, whether you were Hebrew or not, would be passed over, which is where we get this term Passover. And what's interesting is if you got this knowledge, you got it from a Hebrew, from somebody who got it from a Hebrew, who got it from Moses himself. Which means that you were either in the house with a Hebrew when the Passover came, or you weren't, more than likely. And then you got to experience the horror. That is, reality breaking in. Because reality is God's. It's not ours. Our interpretation of the world as we see it is not reality. It is God's to choose and do with what he wants. Which is what he did. God chose a people, out of all the people in the world, these Israelites. He chose them and brought them to Egypt and said, now you are my people, you are sufficiently large, you have received all the blessings you need in Egypt, get out, I've got things for you to do. He chose them to leave. And in their leaving, he showed his power. They wandered around the wilderness, which we heard all about through our Wednesdays, and we learned that they did not follow him, so he chose to eliminate all of them, up to and including Moses, as they wandered around and they got bit by snakes and attacked by plagues and even killed each other. All of them died. Even Moses was able to look at the Holy Land, but he did not cross the Jordan to go into it. And we flip out when we hear this because we think, no, human life is so valuable. But it is short, y'all. Even if you live to be the oldest person who ever lived, let's just say you lived to 200. Double that, okay? 200 years isn't even a drop in the ocean that is eternity. That's God's time scale. Which means God doesn't need to send plagues to kill us. We'll meet him eventually. He is our judge. We don't have an option. The problem is not that death will come to us, though. The problem is how we live in between from now and then. The problem is that the world tells us all kinds of other things, and it started a long, long time ago with a guy named Sargon, who you don't even know. He's not biblical. Maybe you know him. Sargon was the first warlord. Lived in Babylon. He gathered all the Babylonians. They weren't Babylonians at the time. They were just people living in Mesopotamia. And he became the first warlord. He went around raping and pillaging and taking as he wanted. And you know what? It worked out really well for him. Other people saw him do that when he died, and they tried to do it too. And soon enough, they did it on bigger and bigger and bigger scales. The masters, the first real true masters of it, were the Egyptians. But eventually the Babylonians came. They're the ones who sacked the northern kingdom of Israel. And then eventually the Persians came. They're the ones who sacked the southern nation of Judah. And Israel disappeared into that nation. They were codified. They were thrown into this hardened place where they had to fight for who they were. They were the chosen people. And even in the diaspora, even lost in the world of Persia, they were going to remember their God. And everybody looked at that and they said, how can your God be so powerful if he won't even give you your own land? But out of that land came somebody named Darius, who released the Israelites to go back to their world. And when they went back to Israel, they had a book, they had a nation, they had an identity. They were able to stand on their own 2 feet collectively. No more infighting, no more problems. And they rebuilt the temple. And they were stronger after having left Persia, after having died and resurrected, than they were when they went into Persia. And in that moment, everybody would have said, Satan won. Everybody would have said, the evil won. It didn't take long for the world's might makes right to enter into the equation again, where Rome eventually pushed Persia and everybody else in the world back and took over what was then known as the world, the oppressors, the one who overthrew all those who would stand against them. And it's in this world that everybody thought the Messiah was going to come, a judge of old. Nobody thought it would be like it was in Persia, where God might be doing something within the oppressors, where God might be showing what real power was. But that's exactly what he did. He sent this little wussy-pansy guy to wash feet. Rulers don't wash feet. But that's exactly what Jesus just told us. He said, look, if you think you're special, if you think you're the king, wash someone's feet, you'll know right quick you're not. You're a servant. If you think that you have a place in my kingdom, you'd better recognize that you're a servant, which is where I'm going to leave my sermon for a second and say thank you. Because it's important to me as a leader to wash feet. It's not something I want to do. It's not something I look forward to every year. It's something Jesus told me to do, and you all help me fulfill that commandment that Jesus gave me. So thank you. So they're at this party, and I really almost pulled my pastor card because I wanted to read it. Because I really think when Peter says, wash me, he shouldn't say, well, don't wash just my feet, wash my head and the rest of my body. I think Peter should say something like, well, you're going to wash my feet. You better wash the rest of me. They were having fun. They were drinking. They were eating hummus and throwing olives. They were having a blast. This was a supper. This was the best time. That wine flowed freely. This was a feast. Jesus made it a feast. And when he went and he washed everybody's feet, they were like, what are you doing? We're having fun. You should have done this beforehand. You shouldn't have done it now. You're messing with the mojo, Jesus. You don't understand. And I think Peter probably had a little too much because he is a fool, and I think he gave Jesus a hard time. But Jesus, being Jesus, knew better because he looked at these people and he said, I already know your future. You don't even know what you're capable of yet. I know. I know who you're going to be. He knew that 10 years from that day, John was going to be in a society way off in Asia, and he was going to bring the word of God to a whole people who never heard of Jesus. And that story that John wrote would be so well written and so popular, it would end up into a book that we read today. And he looked at Levi and he said the same thing. You're going to write Matthew. And he looked at Mark and he said the same thing. You're going to write a book. And he looked at Luke and he said, you're going to write 2. He looked at his apostles and they were having a good time and they were having a raucous time and they were looking to tie one on because it was Passover. And Jesus said, no, you don't understand. Look, just listen for half a second, guys. He says, verse 1, now before the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come, and it was time for him to depart the world. Jesus knew the severity of what was about to come. In a few hours, man, it was going to hit the fan, y'all. And Jesus knew it, and everybody else was having a good time. He knew that he was going to go to his Father. And having loved his own, these guys that he was having supper with, this Last Supper, he knew that he loved them all the way to the end. Which is a hard thing to do, especially if you know what's about to happen next. This we didn't read. This I held back because I want you to hear these words. Jesus is talking about how he's going to leave. And he's trying to tell these men and these people, if you know what I knew, if you knew that you were going to be leaders, what could I tell you? What is it? Okay, here's what it is. Be a servant, don't be a king. And he says, if you know this, that if you're going to be the best, you must be the last. If you know this, you will be blessed if you do. That's verse 17. Verse 18, I'm not speaking to all of you. because I know whom I've chosen. Now that should on Passover, that should just ring all kinds of bells. Because on Passover, all the days, Israel knew that they were the chosen ones. That's why they had Passover, so they could remember that God chose them. And here they are having Passover, trying to have a good time, and Jesus the joy kill says, now just stop it. You're going to have to be servants, but not all of you are going to be good. I haven't chosen all of you. Some of you will be bad. And here's his reasoning. He says, to fulfill the Scriptures. Now that's real big bad. Because that means that it's been foretold. It's going to happen. It's not just a warning, it's a prophecy. The one who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. That's going to ring true also. This is straight out of Genesis. This is the curse that God gives the snake. And there will be anonymity between you and the woman. And she will be afraid of you, and she will stomp your head with her heel. Jesus is saying, look, all of you who are here, all of you are wonderful, but some of you aren't. This one, he's cursed. And I want you to know that he has been left out. And so we have this juxtaposition between having fun and getting serious. We have this juxtaposition between all the things that God did. Remember when God acted way back when? Well, that's why we have this supper every year, so that we can remember that God acts now. And then here it is. Jesus he knows, but everybody else doesn't know that God is about to act again. Definitively. For the whole world, God is about to act. Not just for those that God chose, not just for this little bit of people, these people he pulled out of Israel, not just for these people who happen to be born of the right mother. God is going to act for everybody, and it's going to go great, but it's also going to go very bad for some. And it's all right there, because we know what happens. We know what Judas does. But I want you to pay attention to how our God works. Our God invited Judas to that table. Our God gave Judas the bread, gave Judas the wine, gave him every opportunity, washed his feet, told him to be a servant, gave him all the grace in the world that he could give him. Our God didn't hold anything back. He didn't say it was limited for some because I choose it. He said it's limited for some. Only some. And that's going to make him really sad. You sat with me. You ate with me. You got up and you left. It's a painful thing to send your son to go and die. It's a message that God hopes that we all hear. We rise. Because on this night, Jesus was betrayed. He gathered all of his disciples around and he taught them. He washed their feet. He broke bread with them. He laughed with them. He drank wine with them. The bread he blessed. And he told them, this bread, this is my body. Whenever you eat this bread, you proclaim my death, and you will receive forgiveness. And then he took a cup, he made sure it was filled with wine, and he blessed it, and in the same way he said, look, this is my blood. Like the blood of the Lamb that we're celebrating on our Passover feast, this is the same blood. I am the true Lamb that forgives all people, not just some people. This is the blood of my covenant, and it is good for not just the chosen few who were blessed to be born of a particular mother. This is the blood of the covenant who welcomes all people to forgiveness of sins. Everyone is privileged. Everyone can be forgiven. And every time that you drink of this, you proclaim my death, and you receive the forgiveness of our Father, who art in heaven.